Happy Wednesday to everybody. I'm Clint Skutchan, T360, another edition of our organized real estate webinar. And man, we have a great panel today, and I think a fun topic as well. It's one that I've been spending the better part of my last couple months working on. And really the last almost 5 years, kind of starting to distill and bring together some of the data around who we are as organized real estate in terms of organizations and organization sizes and all those fun things. So if you haven't seen it yet, yesterday we just released our 2022 organized real estate, what we call top 200, but really underneath that is a totality of all the different associations and MLSs around the country and the variety and sizes. And this year we've added in some regional details to outline some of the shifts that we're seeing and the differences in marketplaces. So we're excited to be able to unveil further kind of details from the list itself, but also to get some perspectives on the list and whether or not the list even matters. To talk with us today, we've got a couple folks from Texas and one from Colorado, which usually, Nobu, I'd just be up the road from you, but I'm in California today. So this kind of outlines the fun nature of our industry. Thank you all for joining. To get us kicked off, I was wanting you to kind of share, what was your the initial association or MLS that you engaged with? What size was it when you first engaged? And this will tell a little bit of your histories here. And Janet, I think I'll start with you. How did you first get introduced to organized real estate, and what entity were you introduced to?
Well, good morning. So I was actually started at the Washington Association of Realtors. So Washington State, and I was ended up being the temp that would not go away. I took a 3-month temporary position and then got sucked into the organization and was there for 20 years. So since then have been in Arizona and now in the Dallas area. And so size-wise, the state association was around 27,000 in Washington State when I first, before it, took a decline. And our membership right now for our local association is just shy of 26,000.
Interesting that you went to a state and now you're at a local. It's nearly the same size in terms of membership. Yeah, that's a great perspective. Bob, how about you? What was your first entry into organized real estate, the entity and the size that it was at that time?
Well, I graduated from UT Law School in 1969 and went to work for the Texas Association of Realtors as their governmental affairs director. And they were, getting more and more involved in politics. And so it was very exciting. And I did that for 3 years, and I moved to Houston and became the lobbyist and the attorney for the Houston Association of Realtors. And then 15 years later became the CEO. And so I've been doing that since 1988.
Do you recall the size of HAR when you moved there, when you first started?
Much smaller than it is today. It's just steadily grown, year after year. I have no idea what it was in that'd be about 1972. So I'm not sure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a lot smaller though.
Yeah. But I mean, you had some incremental gains, but then you had some significant gains by partnering up and doing some of the things that I think we're seeing reflected in some of the numbers that we're seeing now in terms of consolidation.
Yeah. We had 3 very successful, I would say, mergers with the 3 associations around us. And, basically they got much better facilities. The staff got benefits they didn't have, and the members paid lower fees and got more services. So it's been an absolute total win-win. I strongly recommend mergers. So many associations are just too small to really be able to provide the services they need to provide. So working together is always a better way.
We're going to talk about some of those segments here in a moment. Nobu, I think if I recall correctly, your first introduction was as a member. And then obviously got involved in the largest of the large associations, the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah. So it was a weird time. I actually met Janet and Bob late 2000s when I became an NAR leader, and it was that weird time when it was that economic downturn time. I was with the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors at that point. They were at about I think 6,000 members back then. But Mark Allen was the CEO back then, and I got involved and He was like, "You're kind of a pain in the arse, Nobu. You need to get involved with this stuff." And
some things never change, even if sizes do.
So yeah, late 2000s, and then in the NAR as a leader there, did some state and local stuff as well. Chaired the YPN up there, and that was when I was on strat planning. The strat planning committee for NAR membership was like 900,000 during that economic downturn, which is actually a lot more than we all thought, right? And then, kind of things went from there. When I left NAR 2 years ago now, they were at like 1.3 million members. Now they're 1.5. And took the job here in the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, largest local here in Colorado, went from 7,000 to a little over 8,000 in the year and a half that I've been here.
Yeah, that's the trajectory we're seeing across the country. Is that largely everyone is growing. It's just that some are growing at even a faster rate than others. And in particular, it's of note when we hear about the movement to Texas, and I'm sure Bob and Janet, this all too well, is your size and scale has increased over the last couple of years just with the influx of folks. So I want to talk about that in a moment.
Hey, Clint,
go
if
ahead.
I could just say something about that. I looked at, for the past 2 years since the pandemic started, HAR has received 15,000 new members, and all with DocuSign. No one ever physically saw each other or walked in the building everything was done virtually. But 15,000 members in 2 years is mind-boggling.
It really is. And as you point out, like, we've had to adapt and adjust onboarding systems for many of these folks, so they don't even know that interpersonal onboarding process. It's been more remote. So yeah, and we'll show some of the 2020 versus 2022 data overall, and you'll see a little bit here. This is the highest level just in terms of the organizational types and counts. And so these are the 2022 numbers. And the one that's the most mystical, and you hear this bandied about all the time, is, well, how many MLSs are there in the country? And I love asking this question because I generally know, but in any given room, you'll get 14 different answers. And there's some rationale behind that. As we point out, we measure MLS organizations. Now, there are MLS systems that certain entities, like one of our big cooperating partners at RESO does. They're tracking MLS systems, which is different than MLS organizations. So you'll see a different number between the two. But what we're registering and reporting is 536 this year. MLS organizations ranging from 110,000 down to as small as 11, if you can believe that. But you can also see here the total local associations, 1057. Now we're just tracking residential real estate associations. We don't do the commercial folks or anything like that, but that's down from 2022, as you can see here, the decrease about 2.6%. in terms of the associations. What's also interesting here is because we always hear this conversation of associations can't live without MLSs and all those things. But if you look at that, the number of local associations being serviced by regional MLSs, of which there are 108 of those, is now at 632. That's approximately 60% of associations that are serviced by a regional MLS. And so, we're seeing more and more of this decoupling of the association and MLS. Let's maybe get your thoughts on that, in this instance, you all kind of have unique vantage points on the association MLS relationships. And Nobu, I might start with you because this is something that, coming from a previous market, being at the NAR level, and now you've entered into the Colorado marketplace as an executive, and you have a separate MLS that is held by stakeholders. What's that been like for you in realizing the differences and how we collaborate versus what our independent values are?
Yeah, overall, I think it's a good exercise as an association, regardless of whether you're tied to the MLS is real or regional. It's a really good exercise to practice your relevancy and value proposition and trust proposition outside of that relationship. I got to tell you that I get an amplified dose of what I've been hearing during my NAR days traveling across the country. Right, is that there's politics that drive a lot of this stuff. And what has really amped up over the last couple of years is an increased awareness from the broker owner point of view about data, about where it's going, where they think it's going. And And there are more options now, right? The day-to-day agent, the day-to-day broker owner could give not two craps about the politics that drive or not drive any kind of advancement in the MLS or the association end of things. And boy, do they know that there are a lot of options out there. I get questions every day, and maybe it's because of my background and they know this or not. I get a lot of questions about Bob and HAR.com. What does it take to get your data in there? I get a lot of questions about HomeSnap, which has been an increased issue as well. So that, I think, to me has changed the most, is the increased awareness of what's happening out there, because I think a lot of broker owners are really kind of fed up about what's happening. So which has caused me to really amp up what I'm doing on the association ops point of view. And our ideology here is to be a partner. We're going to be a business partner to you guys, and that's really shown just in the year that I've been here. Because the same conversations where they're going, what the heck is Bob doing over there in Houston, right? There's also the counter to, I don't know what you're doing, Nobu, but thank you for doing it, because it's one less conversation that I had to have with my agents about why they're a realtor, right? So it's a good exercise to go into, but I think there's any advice I would give to any AE, both new or seasoned, is to be aware of what your broker owners are aware of and add to that conversation more than anything, and try to cut through those politics as quickly as humanly possible.
People asking about Bob, let's ask Bob. What's it like in your world? Because, I mean, you serve a regional marketplace, but you're largely structured like an association MLS, but,
Yeah.
a sophisticated one where there's separations and decision-making, those types of things. What's it like from your vantage point of, these two entities that seemingly have, a continuum of services between MLS and association, and members have a hard time discerning where one begins and the other ends? What's that been like for you?
Well, I think back to the days when Lori Janik was promoting associations to get together and form a regional MLS, and everybody owns a piece of it. Like I guess Netris is that way with, and Janet's an owner. We had at that time the three associations around HAR, and they came to me, and I was the attorney then, not the CEO, but they came to me and they said, okay, let's do this. We want to own a part of HAR because all of our members use it. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. It's our MLS. If you want to keep using it at no extra cost, that's fine. And that no word led to the merger of those three. And it was the best decision we all made, and it's worked out amazingly. Now, we are a regional MLS, but we're really an association MLS, like you said. And it's kind of like spaghetti. You don't know where one piece starts and the other piece ends. It's just all there in a big bowl, and it works very, very well. And the two entities at HR that are the most important to work together are the MLS team and the HAR.com team, because to the member, they don't know where one starts and one ends. Everything is integrated, MLS integrated into HR.com. So the member goes to HR.com to get the MLS and do everything they need to do on their iPhone or their iPad, because they're out in the field all the time. So it works out very, very well. Then the other thing, we had a lot of agents around Texas that joined HAR's MLS to get their listings into HR.com. And I was like, they don't need to join us. That's just an extra fee to them. Doesn't make any sense. So we got with Austin and San Antonio and Netris and others and said, give us a data feed, then all of your listings will be on HR.com. Your agents will get all those leads for free. They won't have to buy those leads from other portals. And your agents won't have to join us. It'll save them money. So we've done that, and it's been beautiful. We lost, some members, but it was for the best of all, Texas realtors. So in Texas, we really believe in working well together, and I think we have a great team of all the associations and MLS that's working together.
Janet, and I'll get your take on this, because you are serviced by a regional MLS, and yet as I know your relationship a little bit, there's still some MLS related services that your association oversees. So again, you really have this symbiotic relationship with your regional.
Absolutely. So ours is a regional. We have 15 associations that are part of this regional, including, and I think that again, technology is allowing us, and I think that this is something that we're seeing in the MLS world, an association from a different state. So now it's not even, okay, it's just by state. And that's a huge change from the way things used to always be. So now the Northern Louisiana is actually part of our regional MLS. We do partner with them. They do all the vendor connections. They worked with Bob through, approving, as he said, the new partnership where we could get the HR app and for our members and that data feed. But the local associations, we each members joined through whichever association they choose to join through. So it's a bit competitive on the association MLS side, where we have to make sure that we are providing the service. We do all the training, all that kind of support, phone calls. Hey, I can't get into Matrix. What the heck's going on? All that fun stuff. So it is a true partnership, and we really rely on their expertise. But it is also something that their separate board of directors, they have to make the business decisions on the vendors. And, Nobu was talking about how it's not as political. Yeah, it varies from MLS from provider to provider, but we do work well, and it's been a huge benefit for, I think, all participants, because it does consolidate that aspect of the behind the scenes, the back end, with just that day-to-day support, where they can come in if they need something to our service center. They can meet a person, or they can do it online, whichever they prefer. Now that we've gone through 2020 and the past 2 years, all of our services are available, by picking up a phone or online.
So I want to kind of maybe back out a little bit, but we're sharing here now kind of the MLS segments, and this is, where I think the generality of membership counts specifically, and I know Bob, you in particular, like, we don't do anything to make our association that size. It's like the underlying marketplace. But when we start to striate and look at the different sized entities that we see around the country, as you see here with our MLS segments, it does start to really paint a picture of how different organized real estate that seemingly should be very similar is. When you look at, we've got megas, MLSs here, 43 of those with more than 10,000 members in them. And of course, we'll show you in a moment where, there's a big difference between the megas, right? Like there's the entry level 10K, and then there's the top of the line that's 110K, and that's a big deviation. But the one that always stands out here, and we get a lot of feedback on, is if you look at that micro level, those who are under 400 subscribers, and that's 44% of the MLSs around the country. What does this picture in terms of segmenting and seeing the different sizes, how do you guys respond to this? Because I think this does have value versus maybe just the top line numbers and linking them to the association. But is there a story, or what's your observation about the differences between these segments? And jump in, whoever wants to. Yeah, we have to go for it, Janet, and then we have to hold Nobu back.
No, I would never cut Nobu off. I will say that just by example, we have actually approached, and I know Bob has said, merging is great. And as Nobu said, listen to your brokerage. Some of these smaller groups don't necessarily fall in that philosophy. They are perhaps geographically removed. They're in a very small, location. Their members all know each other, and they share their information, and it may be over coffee, even more so than over the MLS. And the leadership is not necessarily interested in breaking that tie and becoming part of a larger group, because that's something that they identify themselves as being, and sometimes at the detriment, I think, to their brokerage and the needs of the brokerage. But those are the times when the brokers have to stand up and say, no, we really do want to be part of this, and we need to make that change.
And this is an interesting one, because I know, Nobu, when we were kind of talking offline, you're like, I really want to see the historic data and all these things. And I'll tell you, we started really bringing together MLS, the counts of organizations and the associated subscriber counts just now. I think we've got about 5 years worth of data, and we've been publishing for 4. So we're just now starting to get some of that historic data. And even still, it's, it's less than scientific. I've got follow-up emails from yesterday's release saying, we'll have this number and that number. And it's like, it's getting better and better year over year, but largely these are self-reported numbers. There's not outside of this list, a holistic tracking of this. So it's an interesting thing that we're just starting to see this picture and start to understand it. And I saw your kind of response. What's kind of, causing you to respond that way?
It's stuff that I saw while I was at NAR, these factions, as Janet kind of put it, and I know Bob deals with every day. It's leadership driven, building moats around their data, building moats around their association and their MLS, because they don't want those outsiders coming up here to do business there, which we're in a post-internet, post-Zillow world now, where for most consumers, and what I'm seeing here really succinctly, I had a conversation yesterday with an agent. Upper bracket has to have his license, or has to be aligned with multiple MLSs and multiple associations in this state, because he has buyers now that they're looking at a $10 million home in Cherry Creek, or the same people are going to look at a $10 million second home up in the mountains here. And in order to provide really good services for them through his team, and it's not just him, by the way, he's got literally somebody else up there, right? A local, somebody integrated into that culture up there. He just hates the politics, and it's just like, I just want to help my clients. And what can we do? But this is what Bob and Jenna are talking about, and what has been around for years is this protectionist attitude that's only, I think, been more emboldened, and they're building bigger walls. And again, as Janet mentioned, it's going to be these brokers who I'm talking to every day, and here in Colorado, that are like, when does this stop? It's costing me too much money in a time when, if anything, the agents have gotten more efficient at making money, and they're making more money heads and shoulders of everybody else. And the brokers' margins have become even slimmer. And that's, to me, is where this thing will all break, right? These molds will go away at some point. But it's really about ideology and philosophy right now of leadership that's causing this stuff. So it's an issue that's been around for years, and it's going to continue to be that way for a while, as long as we protect it.
I think it's interesting, though, as you just enumerated, is that there are more people, I think, that are working cross-segment now. Where we're seeing large metropolitan areas, from an affordability standpoint, their clients are just, going outside of that. So you have, intersection of large metro and medium to large size metros coming together. And then you've got these, like you point out, especially in places like Colorado, these high-end resort communities now that are seeing, affluence coming into large metros that want to be in both markets. And so we're seeing, I think, more crossover in terms of consumer activity, to be sure, but I think brokerage and agent activity going across these segments too, where then they're asking, well, why is it so different there than what I knew somewhere else? And even with some of the shifts that we're seeing, and again, we'll show this kind of regional movement, I think we're having more and more people that are moving from different areas into new areas to do business. And like you had pointed out, Nobu, it's just such a different experience than what they came from. In terms of that. Bob, what it's been like in your part of the world? Because, Texas is really interesting because you have seen such an influx. Are you seeing these changes occurring and hearing these conversations as well from brokers and agents that are like, wow, this is a very different experience than what I knew where I came from?
Well, I look at this chart and it's very interesting. HAR is a mega MLS, and we bump up against a micro MLS. And 90% of the agents that belong to the micro MLS also belong to the HR MLS. So they're paying double fees for no reason at all other than politics. There's no business logic whatever in this thing. But some people have said, we would rather go out of business than join HAR. Well, that's really not a very good idea. So, it's not worth, losing sleep over. If they want to do it, that's certainly their right and their money and their, whatever. But they've joined HR for HR.com and for our showing system that we've created, and for agent ratings and all the tools we offer, that a micro MLS can't offer any of those. It's impossible. And in fact, looking at this, I don't know how anybody that's not at least a large could actually compete in today's world.
Yeah.
You know, it's size is everything, because it gives you the ability to have money and to have talent. You got to have a talented staff. I've always said I'm the dumbest, laziest employee at HAR, and I want to have the very best people around me to make the right decisions. And if you can't have a fantastic staff, you can't compete with the people we're competing. And I won't mention any names, but it's not us that are competing. It's us with other entities. So
we have two of the five largest associations in the country. Here's the top end of our just local realtor association list, and Bob and Janet being on this list. So we've honed in and talked a lot about the MLS for right reasons. But tell me about the size and scale and scope of the associations, because interestingly, what we're seeing in a lot of our performance-based survey data is that those medium to large sized associations that have entered into more of a regional agreement for MLS delivery and are focusing on association level services are actually performing much better in terms of the members' perception of value around those key service areas for the association. So let's talk a little bit about, size and scale and scope and how that relates to the local association and how you can perform there, and maybe set the MLS aside for a moment. Any thoughts on that in terms of the size of different sized associations delivering against their value proposition? Because there's a lot more of a community aspect to the association than there might be with the MLS.
Well, again, it's back to, if you have enough members and you have enough money, you can do a lot of things. And so we do, for example, our MLS is now in Spanish, because Hispanics are a huge population segment of the Houston area. And our training, our virtual training has gone through the roof. And so we have all the right tools, and we can have an instructor anywhere in the world teaching realtors in Houston. And they love the idea they don't have to drive across town in the rain, find a parking place. All they got to do is turn on their computer and they could do the same thing. TreePack or RPAC. For the last 5 years, we've raised over $1 million from our members, because we've got the culture that TreePack and RPAC is extremely important. So there's so many things you can do if you're large and have that ability. And again, it's having the right staff to make it work, and having the right members and the right leadership that buys into it and work together as a team. And I think that's really what it's all about. But I feel kind of bad for the really small ones that won't, merge, and because the only people that are getting hurt are their members. And it's really kind of a sad situation.
Piggyback on that. I was going to say, to piggyback on that, I think that a couple things Bob pointed out are key, no matter what size your association is, and that is getting your leadership to understand and invest in their professional staff. So our membership has grown, and these aren't Houston numbers, but our numbers have grown by 6,000 members just in the 3.5 years I've been here. So thinking about the impact on staff, we didn't have a professional marketing individual. That's crucial. We now have a great senior marketing person who's now being able to take that new technology that we are investing in and start doing the target marketing and the analytics of our membership data and all those things that then we can do a better job in focusing on that individual member and that member engagement, so that we can, even though we are a mega association of almost 26,000, we can make it feel like a small association. At least that's always been my goal, is that no matter the size, let's give that member that experience, that touch, that don't send him an email that 26 1,000 people don't care about, send it, he took a commercial or she took a commercial class, send them more commercial information. She took a new member orientation class. Okay, send her that information on, give me your GRI, all those things that, you want to have as an individual. So make that technology meet the needs of your members. And so that's really a focus. And it does, as Bob said, it takes money, but it also takes that leadership mentality to say, no, it's worth that investment.
Yeah,
I think that's an important one. Sorry to jump in there, Nobu, but I think that's an important one is that when you get larger in an association capacity, you still have to remain cognizant of that connectivity to the individual member. And, the larger your footprint is geographically, the more diverse the membership is. I think that is a key component to retain that, because at a smaller scale and scope, that's sometimes just inherent because of the nature of how closely associated you are as a community. So that's an interesting point as you do grow larger as an association. Go ahead, Nobu. Sorry.
Yeah, well, because I don't have the numbers that Janet or Bob has, but I've got the footprint. The Denver metro area, it is literally, I've gone to meetings of one end of 10 to the other. It's taken me an hour and a half to get there, right? So I may not have 50,000 members, but I got that footprint, and I gotta admit that I had it pretty easy. I mean, coming in to this position during a global pandemic, when so much was unknown, was actually benefited me, because I was able to go and really get tactical with staff, and they'll say, what are the things that you always wanted to do during the times that, frankly, that we benefited from a bunch of mergers in the last 5, 6, 7 years here in the Denver metro area. And it was, let's go all in with virtual events so we can ease the travel time for our members who may not want to go to even our 3 satellite offices then that we had. But it was the experience that we wanted to relay from the get-go was streamlined, right? It was, we're going to be a steward of not only your money, but your time. As traffic especially came back, people are more and more embracing it. And I think the one thing that we have here staff-wise is getting tactical with them too, is that, I'm an association with a full-time events manager. She doesn't do it just the education, right? Which you have usually if you comms director handling education and events. I got a full-on events director, and she's a former realtor, and she goes around our market being tactical with what locals want. So we lead with digital events, but we have these smaller, intimate, in-person events that aren't dependent on size in order to be successful. It's the quality of that content that's local to these folks that honors them and their local markets. As Clint, as you know, Denver is a very siloed market with very different micro markets in it. And those folks may have been forgotten during this massive merger trend over the last 5-10 years. They need to be honored now in order to get that buy-in of not only them, but their leaders as well.
Yeah. Clint, I'd also follow up on the fact that we have a huge footprint as well, multiple counties. I mean, it easily takes an hour and a half to drive from one end to the other. And realtors are very friendly, they're very social, and they like to be together. And so we have what we call area networking meetings, which could be a breakfast or a lunch. And the people in their market get together and share ideas, share speakers, share listening, share, just get together and have fun. And it's good because if I'm going to be working with you on a transaction, if we know each other and we respect each other and we're friends, it makes everything much better. So these are very popular, the area networking meetings. And so we really encourage the social as well as the business piece.
Yeah, that's one aspect that when we go in and we work with folks that are maybe looking at parsing out their association from their MLS services, is that we remind associations, hey, remember when you were a value as a network because you got to know people and so that you could have those trusted referrals. So you didn't feel the need to follow your clients when you get outside of your area of expertise. So, don't forget about that value proposition. It's an easy one to overlook because networking as a generality maybe is a little more difficult for associations to lean into, given the totality of all the different networking opportunities, but specific to getting to know referral partners and having someone that's trusted outside of marketplace, that's still a really valuable place for associations to operate in. This is a breakdown. We've added this in this year to kind of, there's the big list, which I know, again, is really sometimes overwhelming, but we've broken this out into the various kind of census regions around the country. And so you can see the top 10 and their size differentiation around the country. And so it starts to add in some different layers where we can become more intelligent about, again, what do these numbers mean, right? I know that in totality, it's like, well, we didn't do anything to cause this. It's market. It's a reflection of, just what's happening there. It's not necessarily association attraction, but I think this is pretty interesting. And, as we can show you some of the 2020 versus 2022 movement in these same general areas, and to look and see that movement activity. But you can see the size and scope differences, in terms of the West is kind of a little bit, more striated in terms of, the size and scope. And Janet, you'll know this from the one at the top of the list there. And in the West has been several iterations of consolidations that it took to get to this. Whereas, you look at a Miami in the South, and Bob, you're in that same region where these are some of the largest of the large entities in the South, but yet they're also, the South is the one that has the most entities. So there's bigger striation in this area than what you see elsewhere. The Northeast is really interesting because we've seen a lot of consolidation around MLSs and associations. You see smaller states, so you have less of this big area. And so there's some differences here regionally when you start to look at this. And we forget about that. Again, I think when we look at a big list like we've released in the last few years, is there's regionality, there's differences in marketplace and all those different things that are occurring. So I don't know if you all found this interesting, but for us to start to dig in on this and be a little more sophisticated and see what's really happening in the organized real estate space has been really interesting to us. And of course, this is the data around associations, and the data around MLSs gets even more bifurcated in terms of the top end versus the bottom end. I'll just show you those here. So when you look at the differences in size in the top 10, it's very significant. As we talked about, the mega starts at 10,000 in MLS range for our segments, but then it goes all the way up to 110,000. So in the West, you see this big gap versus, in the Northeast, it's a little tighter, but still of consequence. So interesting. I don't know if you guys have any general observations about these numbers. Again, the numbers are the numbers, but what does it mean? And how should, organized real estate leaders be thinking about this in terms of their strategies and their planning and their thinking about service deliverables back out to the brokers?
One change that, or one observation, or just from experience, Clint, is that as a reminder, in Washington State, for instance, you may have 50% of licensees choosing to be realtor members, because in Washington, the largest MLS, Northwest MLS, is a broker-owned MLS. So in Washington, you don't have to be a realtor member. So in trying to compare that realtor association membership to some of those, I think that can skew it a little. It was a totally different culture coming going to Arizona and coming to Texas, because everyone is a realtor in Texas. And so it's just it puts a little different slant on looking at those numbers.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Nobu. I know you know this, having gone to Colorado, where it's also a state that's open for non-member realtorship and MLSs. We see the top line number in MLS deviates from the realtor membership across the country, and it's about I think a 300,000 difference. And some of that is in the duplicate, those like the Bob pointed out earlier, that are subscribing to multiple MLSs, but also there's a percentage of those who are, as you point out, Janet, aren't realtors at all, but are subscribers of MLSs. And that is a fascinating piece when, again, you start to look at the numbers in totality. Nobu, any thoughts on that? Because you've just kind of moved into that marketplace where it's more of the norm, and there's a lot of brokerage strategies around that, whether they need to be a realtor member or just an MLS member.
And actually, Troy Reck is actually kind of nailing it in the chat there, where you've got overlap, you've got a concentrated area of membership, but then you've got MLSs that are just overlapping on top of that. I think it's just the days of the association member numbers to the MLS subscriber count, I think those days we just can't use that from my point of view anymore. I mean, look at RA Colorado, 27,000 members, 27,000 subscribers, which is like what, 4,000, 5,000 at least in the metro area that aren't realtors. So it's a different ball game we're playing over here to fight for value, and it's the dynamic between the association and the MLS. I think is going to epitomize what's going to happen in my mind as the industry evolves going forward, which is why it takes the very least a really good leadership dynamic, leadership communication to shape that future together. Honestly, it blows my mind. I know Janet used to be there in Phoenix. That you got WeServe, you got Phoenix and Scottsdale, all pretty close together, headquarter wise, making up the majority of those numbers at the top there. That stuff to me is like, wow, where it goes. The business models are all fairly different between those three, and that's where I think we need to start thinking about from the association, non-MLS association point of view. Where do we go from here? Where are the opportunities? And that's what I look at. I just don't even factor in the MLS anymore.
Clint,
follow up? Yeah.
In HAR does not require association membership to a realtor membership to be a member of MLS. And I think Netris has the same policy, I believe. But they all are pretty much, as Janet said. Now, there's a real simple reason for that. I work for XYZ broker. I come into HR and I say, I don't want to be a member. I just want to join MLS. We say, great, except you're with a broker who's a realtor. And as long as you're there, he's going to have to pay your dues. So unless you leave that broker and go to a non-realtor broker, you can't do this. And that's what has kept, so many, the vast majority of agents in the realtor organization, because they don't want to leave that broker.
Yep.
Yeah. And what's different than that is in states like Washington and in Colorado, there are literally the same brokerages that set up two separate entities, one that is a realtor entity and one that isn't. And I mean, you've seen that, Nobu, and I don't know if Janet, you recall that happening up when your time in Washington or not, but that's a unique and very different circumstance.
Oh my God. It's a win for me every time I one of the major brokerages here with the non-realtor entity asked me to join in on their brokerage meeting yesterday. That's a win for me. Broker owner outreach is a priority, always has been a priority. I think, Janet and Bob and I talk about this all the time, but broker outreach is a thing. Now is the time to actually execute on that, because these little wins matter now, especially, for us, we're a growing association, and we need those guys to be advocates for us beyond old habits, which is, I think that's the thing that's driving all of it. I asked them point blank, why are you getting your agents to be realtors? They don't know. And help them with that answer has been a number one mission of mine.
Yeah, you have to do that more and more. So we've been talking about these shifts that have occurred. Of course, 2020 kind of these numbers for us, 2020 were collected at the end of 2019, 2022 collected at the end of 2021. So obviously these contrast, different realities for most of the world, if not, organized real estate. And so you can see these changes in terms of numbers and member counts. And obviously overall there's been growth, but you can see this southern region is just growing at leaps and bounds. So those numbers that Bob and Janet have shared with us have been of consequence. Nobu, you mentioned that you're growing by leaps and bounds in Denver. And yet if you look at the western region, which encompasses, not only the Pacific and the mountain areas, you're not seeing as much of a shift there overall, it looks like. But what you are seeing is movement internal in this western region. So you've seen a lot of movement from California out into Oregons and Colorados and those types of things. But now where you're really seeing this is in its impact to the South region, where, both Bob and Janet, you are in Florida. And so we really see this exacerbated movement of members in terms of where they're going between 2020 and 2022, which again, I think reflects what we've been hearing. And I know we reported on in our trends report about this shift of the marketplace. So the organized real estate space is almost just an extension of that in terms of our numbers that we see. What are your thoughts on these numbers as you see them kind of broken out and contrasted?
Well,
Bob might start, or go ahead, Janet.
No, go ahead, Bob.
Bob, any thoughts on your end?
the West region is not as big a jump as the South. And, if you just Austin, Texas probably accounts for most of that because all these people from California moving to Austin. So no, it's pretty obvious, there is a shift there.
Yeah, these are just the association numbers. We can. What gets interesting is if you break this down even further and you start going into the subregions. So this is where I was mentioning. You can see the Pacific versus the mountain here, and the South Atlantic. Versus kind of the other areas, the West, South, Central, which is where Texas is going to fall into. So as you start to break these down further and further, you see that further kind of distillation of where folks are moving, and it does very much fall in alignment with what we're seeing in the marketplaces. And so, Janet, I know you were going to add to that, but I just as you keep going down in these layers, there's more telling stories, and not surprising. I don't think it's what we've been seeing and experiencing. It's just visualizing it.
Well, I think that realtors members, obviously, they're following their families, they're following industries. So when you've got Amazon, in Texas, and you've got Tesla, and you've got, their new electric cars, and all those huge industries that are coming into Texas, those that are abandoning California and moving to Texas, realtors are coming, with family and for other reasons. And with the number of families that are coming into Texas, it's, I don't know, something like 1,000 a day or whatever it is, in the Austin area, in Dallas area. Our inventory is so low, I'm not sure what all the new realtors are actually listing, selling. But, the other thing, as we all know, is that when unemployment goes up, people start reactivating their membership. And so we saw a lot of reactivations in the last 2 years. We've seen a lot of, and then when everyone hears on the news how businesses or housing market is jumping, the average citizen listening to that, they're like, wow, I want to get into real estate because I can make all this money now. And so they tend to become members again of the association. And so that's kind of that, you're getting that membership. Now, my concern, and I know, I think just talking with Nobu, right now is that time to look at it as that's great. Let's just keep those reserves. Let's build those now so that when that market turns, whenever that happens and members decide that they really aren't going to make a living, and they already sold their one house that they got got their license to do, then that number is going to decline, and we need to be ready for that. But yeah, I just see the industries coming into Texas, and I think realtors are following that.
I'll echo that too. We just recently hosted the governor's demographer, or the state demographer, along with the EDC CEOs from a bunch of our counties here. And your data is actually matching what they're seeing, because you can't measure population growth as a primary indicator of what growth is going to be for your city, your state anymore, because it's almost a lagging indicator. Denver in general has gone from 5th to 39th, I think, in affordability inside 3 years. And the 3 top competitors for Denver metro area economic growth is North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas, right? I mean, Texas was one thing, but to hear North Carolina and Georgia factored into that, because it's affordable there. There's still a lot of opportunity for growth there. And you're seeing increasingly companies, especially on the West Coast. I talk to my friends at Google all the time about this. They don't see boundaries anymore. They don't see time zone boundaries, especially with so much of their staff becoming remote. Like being on the East Coast, where they can send their customer service staff to go live in North Carolina cheaply is now a perk, right? So to me, the tail has always wagged the dog in this industry, right? So you got realtors will go where their clients and customers will go. I think it's just much more pronounced now. And to Janet's point, they're flat out upping and moving. I know more Chicago agents operating out of North Carolina now than ever before. North Carolina and Nashville. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard, right? Because it's like Venus and Mars. Different types of cultures in these areas, but they're going there for a better quality of life. They're renegotiating their lives as well, and it's been pretty cool to see that stuff. So, you know, these numbers are exactly what people above real estate, the EDC folks, development centers are citing as well. I love it.
Clint,
I think there's go ahead, Bob, and then I want to wrap up.
Evidence of this is if you go to Google and you search for how to become a, whatever it is, the last 12 months, the most searched term for how to become a was a real estate agent.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. So that just shows that there's proof it's happening as we're seeing.
So there's a couple things here. One, we're talking about the external impacts of, you know, population, economic changes on membership. I think we always have to turn that around and say, knowing that that's the case, what's incumbent on us as whether it be MLS or association providers to give back to those factors, that we are a part of a much bigger ecosystem. So there's that component. And then the other one that you kind of, and I know Nobu, you had mentioned this before we got together in some of the pre-work, was, you know, the impact of the Great Resignation, which I think goes back to the point that you just made, Bob, is that, you know, we're seeing some of that movement, and we've especially towards the end of 2021. So that had to have impacted our numbers. Yeah. But what does that mean, and how does this larger Great Resignation movement in your mind impact 2022 numbers for membership and 2023 numbers? Because I've heard a couple of you talk about, well, we've been through these cycles before, and we know there's a hump coming. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on, you know, are we getting towards the top end? Is there just so many factors that have gone into the last 2 years that we really need to start looking beyond that and plan for what if scenarios in the next couple of years? And jump in, whoever wants to take that one.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I budget off a 2017 member count. I mean, that's the height of our last merged associations here, and everything else is, frankly, it's gravy, right? So, you know, if we have the opportunity to give back through better events, bring in higher quality speakers, maybe more expensive staff bonuses, you know, that's the big one for me, right? Is to be able to go and give them that. But I think the big thing for me is I was at NAR at the point where the recovery was happening, membership count was going back up from that decline, and boy, you know, there are long-lasting effects of seeing people suffer from that, both in the association world and in the realtor world. So, you know, I think if you learn from it and learn what opportunities there are, I think you can capitalize on it.
Janet or Bob, any thoughts kind of projecting forward or hesitancy to believe that, you know, the last 2 years is an indicator of what the next 2 years will be like, you know, that maybe we need to be a little more grounded and doing some environmental scans, you know, in terms of the changing member type that we have. You know, we have the definition of a member has definitely changed in the last 2 years and is likely to continue to do so. But any thoughts kind of projecting forward? Are we capping out here and need to start thinking about, you know, changes that might not be the upward trends that we're used to, or are we on this big trend and we're not getting off any soon?
I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. I would like to make a comment about what you just said about the changing member. Up until, you know, fairly recent times, every broker in Houston was owned by a local Houstonian. I mean, they were all just locally owned. Today, our 5 largest brokers, based upon dollar volume of listings, the number 1 is a New York broker. The number 2 is a New Jersey broker. The number 3 is a Seattle, Washington broker. The number 4 is a New York broker. The number 5 is a New Jersey broker. So no individually owned brokers make the top 5. So that's a gigantic shift. And then we looked at the number of listings by broker. What broker has the most listings, not dollar value, but number of listings? It's Open Door. And OfferPad is number 10. And I predict, based upon what I'm seeing, OfferPad will probably be number 6 in a relatively short period of time. So it's a totally different world out there than it used to be. We were so used to one set of facts, and now it's totally changed. I don't know if everybody else is seeing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the things that we're going to be focusing on is with those changes, number one, looking at more, looking at the opportunities to utilize contract employee, contract consultants, rather than hiring those individuals that then have to be let go when, you know, the market turns. I'm with Bob. I think for, at least for Texas, we're still going to be strong for, and looking forward. When will that turn? I think that's more of an inventory. That's going to be, when can people still make a living and pay their own mortgage while, being a full-time realtor. And I do know that just some of the education and because membership has ramped up so quickly, one of the things that we are seeing, and I know we talk about all the time, but that's professionalism in the industry. And that's something that I think when people are just jumping on to become, that they're not getting that necessarily that training or that mentorship. So I think that that's something that our association will continue to, work with our brokers to find out what they need to supplement for their new agents, and to help train them and help to make sure that they're staying out of court. And then also just the consumer services. What are the brokers, what services and what technology can we help them, since the consumer services are key to them. And so we'll be looking at those things. And I know for me, one of the challenges right now is just keeping staff and battling that who's going to be remote, who's going to continue to come back into the office as our members want to do.
Yeah. I think for me, I can be a little more nimble. Well, I do have a big footprint. I got a fairly small membership count, so engagement is easier than than what Janet and Bob have to go to. Then you got to know the right people. For me, it's like I can actually go out there. I think the big thing, and Bob nailed it, right? It's we got to lose these ideas of boundaries anymore. The amount of Texas license plates that I see here is ridiculous. It's up there with California license plates as well, but along with Idaho and Arizona, right? So, for me, it's thinking about scale is huge. Like I think every day about how I could collaborate with people like Bob and Janet, where I'm kicking around here a leadership academy of regional associations here who are forward thinking or seeing this kind of this growth. Like, what does growth look like going forward, and how can we help power that? Right. So with the Boise folks and out in Phoenix, and the virtual events, good Lord. I mean, those can be monetized. I recently collaborated with Phoenix on a Steve Murray event that was out there as well. So, if you can be nimble, figure out where you need to be, figure out who you need to engage with, and execute on that, but be nimble where you can, and think about where growth possibilities lie. And for folks like me, it may not be in Denver, right? Because it's the headaches and politics in this market alone make it not very conducive to actual growth. But boy, can I benefit my member by putting them in touch with a Boise agent, but with a Phoenix realtor? Yeah. And that's pretty exciting right now. So we have to look at these as opportunities, plan the right way, but really take charge of what the future looks like. And I think we're all doing that here in the right ways.
Clint, we had a governmental affairs director a while back who said, the organization is a mile wide and an 1/8 inch deep. And I was just looking at, in the last 12 months, 48% of our agents did no business at all or one side. So half of your membership is not in the real estate business, okay? 20% is in the real estate business, full-time, going strong. And that's
And Bob, has those stats changed since the downturn? No. It's been consistent like that for a decade at least.
Yeah. That's a scary number. I mean, for any business person, if half of your clientele isn't really using your product, they could all leave tomorrow and it wouldn't affect them one bit, but it would certainly affect organized real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Nobu, you hit on something that I do believe we're going to see the strong emergence of, even beyond MLS. But I think these, hyper regional alliance structures that allow you to partner up add value not only at a local scale but at a regional scale, because you're learning from each other. I believe we're on the precipice of that occurring more, and maybe shifting away from even, I know, Bob, kind of what you known as that historical, let's consolidate, let's merge. It may be that the politics is so thick we move outside of that, but we find other ways to add value into our changing member that isn't just in our location anymore. They're in multi-states. So, well, thank you all for joining. I know, we kind of started this conversation. Do the numbers even matter, or are they just, numbers? But I think when you look at it, there's a story to tell. There's a strategic consideration, and not just for the now, but the projecting forward that we hope that we're adding to the industry by sharing these numbers, and appreciate all three of you sharing your perspectives on it. Any closing thoughts before we let you go? We've run you out of ideas. If that's the case, then I feel really impressed knowing the three of you.
I think T360 research is absolutely phenomenal in every aspect. I don't know how y'all do it, but you're great for the industry.
We love it. Well, thank you. Nobu, Janet, anything else?
No, just thank you for having these webinars and continuing to help all of us become stronger organizations and to learn from each other, because there's not a moment that I spend with Nobu and Bob and you that I don't learn something. So appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
I think
likewise.
maybe to echo that is like, don't sit on your hands. I think sitting on our hands during the last downturn didn't help us as an industry. Seek out the opportunities there and learn. If you're not in your market, do it outside with people like Bob and Janet and folks like you, Clint. So appreciate it.
All right. Be well, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get a recording out for those that want to share with leadership, and otherwise appreciate you sharing your time with us, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Clint.
Bye.